In today's class, we're going to be looking at organizational strategy. And we will look at it from a standpoint of business analysis. So this class is going to be very beneficial to business analysts. However, the class is also something that would be beneficial to people who are in business. So if you're an entrepreneur or if you are at maybe a senior level of management, you might still want to follow today's class because you're going to need the content. So we're going to be looking at organizational strategy, and we will be looking at it from the contexts of the internal environment and the external environment. And we're going to make use of two tools to look at these further. So for the internal environment, we're going to make use of what is known as VMOST. And then for the external environment, we're going to use the framework which is known as PESTLE. So that's what we're covering today. Let's get right into it. Before we go on, I'd like to mention that I have a complete course on business analysis, and you can take that course. You can also become certified by BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT, and that's like the most acceptable certification for business analysis, particularly in the UK and in many parts of the world. So you can take the Foundation Certificate, the Practitioner Certificate, and on like that. For more details, just head on to globalquals.com, and you can enroll for the course and the certification right there. Secondly, I'd like to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. Click on that subscribe button so that you can have access to more and more of my content. So click it now. Subscribe to my channel. So, organizational strategy. What is strategy? I'm sure you've heard that term several times before. And you probably know that strategy is a word that is often used in the military. When you want to fight a battle, you want to defeat an enemy, you need to strategize. You need to come up with a plan. You need to have a desired end goal in mind. And you need ways or strategies of attaining that goal. So strategy is a military term. And different people have devised different strategies in the past, some of which have been very famous. Let me share one of them with you. You've probably watched the story of Troy, and well, we don't know if it was true or if it was just a legend, but you've probably watched that story and you might have heard about the Trojan horse. The Trojan horse was a strategy. So this country, I think it was Greece, had been trying to get into Troy. They had been trying to destroy that city, and they couldn't do so. Because Troy had very formidable walls. So eventually they came up with a strategy, and the strategy was to make a big horse and then leave the horse behind while their army left. So it would look as if they were offering the horse as a sacrifice, maybe as some form of appeasement to say, we're sorry that we attacked you, we're leaving now. And so they did that. But unknown to the Trojans, it was a trap, because right inside that horse, some of their soldiers had crept inside, they had hid inside. And so when the army seemed to leave, the Trojans opened the gate and took in the horse, and they were happy. They said, okay, these guys have finally left, they are appeasing us now. So they took in that horse as a sacrifice, thinking that that was what it was. Unknown to them, there were soldiers inside, and late at night, the soldiers came out, opened the city gates for their entire army to enter, and that was how the Trojans lost the war. So what I described just now was a strategy that was used to win a battle. Strategies can be several things, can depend on several factors. But from a standpoint of business analysis, from a standpoint of an organization, we are going to be looking at the internal environment and the external environment. So before we do that, let's have a more proper definition. What really is strategy? Porter described strategy as an integrated set of actions aimed at increasing the long-term well-being and strength of an enterprise. In other words, strategy is the actions that are done that will ensure that the organization has long-term well-being, or, like a human being. Human beings get sick. So what this does, what strategy does, is that it ensures that the organization isn't sick, that the organization is well, experiences well-being for a long period of time. So that also tells us that effective strategies will help the organization to last and will help it to probably outperform its competitors. But ineffective strategies will lead to organizational sickness, which in this case just implies that the organization is unable to perform the roles for which it was founded, and it is sick. It needs to visit the hospital all the time, or it is even going to die completely. Another author, Johnson, said that strategy is the long-term direction of an organization. I like that definition because strategy is something that is long-term. That said, there can be short-term strategies, but all of them need to tie towards a long-term strategy. So that's something that we're still going to see. So how do you understand the strategic context of an organization? There are three key things that you need to know. The first is the current state. And I would put that in a different way by asking a question. Where are you? Where are you? So the current state. The second is the target state, or the desired state, the destination, the place that the organization wants to go to. So to answer that, I would ask the question, where are you going? What is your destination? What is your desire? So where are you? The current state. Where are you going? The target state. And the third thing that you need to know is what is in between, and that is what is called the roadmap. The roadmap is how you will get there, how you will transit from where you are, or how the organization will transit from where it is to where it wants to be. I think it's even easy to personalize this, even for individuals. When coming up with an individual strategy, I believe that the questions would very much be the same. Where am I? What is my current state? Where do I want to be? What is the target state? And the third thing would be, what is the roadmap? How do I get there? With the answers to those three questions, you can explain the strategic context of an organization. So in today's class, we're going to look at the current state of the organization. And like I said, we're going to consider two parts to it. So we're going to look at the internal environment, and we're going to look at the external environment. Why is this? Because in reality, each organization is affected by two different sets of factors. There are internal factors, and then there are external factors. So we're going to look at those two using the frameworks that I mentioned earlier. We will be using VMOST and PESTLE. So, internal environment analysis. You see, this provides insights into the strengths and weaknesses of an organization. Because with the internal environment, what you're looking at are the factors that are internal, things that rely on the organization itself, things that can be changed or can be adjusted by the organization itself. So they are internal factors. But you see, with external factors, you would be looking at factors that are not within the control of the organization. The only thing that the organization can control with regards to external environment factors is their own reaction to it. So they don't have any control over the actual circumstances, but they can control how they will react to the circumstances, which is why we're looking at the factors in any case, because when you know what the problems are or what the potential issues are, then you can know how to adjust. If there are internal factors, there are things that you probably can solve, but if there are external factors, there might be things that you would want to avoid or mitigate in some way or the other. So for the internal environment, there are several frameworks that can be used, but we're going to stick with VMOST. VMOST. And what is VMOST? VMOST is an acronym for Vision, Mission, Objectives, Strategy, and Tactics. Vision, Mission, Objectives, Strategy, and Tactics. Now, that looks so simple, right? Those are terms that we've always heard. They are very simple, but you would be surprised that in many organizations, particularly in SMEs, in small and medium enterprises, these things are not well defined, and so there is no organizational plan. It's more like the organization is not achieving anything. It's not going towards any particular goal. And like they usually say, if you fail to plan, then you're planning to fail. If you don't have a goal, then you're not going to score anything. Oftentimes, small companies are plagued by that problem, the absence of VMOST or very poorly written VMOST. So let's look at the different elements of VMOST very quickly. The first is the V, which stands for vision, the vision. So what is the vision? What is vision? So for those of us who are familiar with American history, we might know of a time when a young black man, whose name was Martin Luther King Jr., delivered a famed speech, and it was the I Have a Dream speech. And in it, he said a lot of things. I have a dream. One day, my 4 little children will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream. And he went on and on and on. You see, that was one of the moving points of history, particularly in African American history. It was a very moving point because it ended up casting a vision for the African American people of that time. It gave them a picture. It told them that they could aspire to something. They could aspire to a time when things would change in the history of their country. They could aspire to a time when they would be able to vote and be voted for. And so when someone like former President Barack Obama became president, it was like fulfilling that vision, right? So I gave that example because I wanted you to get a good picture of what vision is. Vision is really like your target state. Vision is where you are going, where the organization is going, the direction that the organization is going. The target destination for the organization. And so the vision can be expressed in a few words, it can be expressed in a few sentences, but the vision is often lofty. It is often something that is, high up there. It is aspirational. The organization is saying, this is what we want to do. This is the kind of thing that we want to accomplish. This is the kind of change we want to bring to the world. So for each organization, the vision is that lofty thing that they're saying they want to be able to accomplish. And a way to know the vision is that oftentimes it is also long-term in nature. So the vision can be something that cannot be accomplished right now, but might take the next 20 years or the next 50 years to accomplish. So that is the vision. It is important to note that the vision is not the how. The vision does not tell you how it will be accomplished. The vision just tells you what the organization aims to accomplish. However, the next one is the mission. The mission takes into consideration the how. The mission is much more short-term. The mission is more like what is done on a daily basis to ensure the attainment of the vision. So the vision is aspirational, but the mission is what is done on a daily basis. It is the one that keeps the organization running. It is like what the organization is going to wake up, what the people in it are going to wake up and try to accomplish every day, every week, every month, every year. So the mission is much more short-term in nature, but it is the attainment of that mission that will lead to the fulfillment, ultimately, of the vision. Now, this means that if you are an entrepreneur or maybe you work in an SME and you don't have these two things defined very clearly, then you need to watch and rewatch this video, because you need to pay attention to the elements that are in your vision and your mission. Your vision should be something that gives people hope, something that they want to work towards, and they know that we're not there yet, we might not be there in the next 5 years, but one day we are going to be able to get there. So they're aspiring to something, and the mission should encapsulate what they are going to do on a daily basis, what they will keep doing from time to time, that will help the organization to eventually attain that vision. Let's now look at the objectives. The objectives are the specific outcomes that the organization seeks to achieve. The specific outcomes. So we've talked about the vision and the mission, but you see, those are in some ways broad. You need to still break it down into specific things. So we want to achieve A, B, and C. So that breakdown is what you have as the objectives, and the objectives help to guide towards the attainment of the mission and the vision. That leads us to the strategy. The strategy is the long-term approach that would be taken to achieve the vision, the mission, and the objectives. So it means that the strategy tells much more about the how, the specific things that will be done in order to accomplish those lofty and inspirational and aspirational goals that were defined earlier. And the final one from VMOST is the tactics. So what are the tactics? The tactics are specific and detailed ways that the strategy would be accomplished. So it means that when the organization has a strategy, then it needs to have tactics. Tactics can be short-term. They are just specific ways that that strategy, the long-term strategy, is going to be accomplished. And tactics can change. They can keep changing with time. Tactics can be developed based on feedback, based on the market situations, based on the changing situations of maybe the business environment. So the tactics keep changing. They are continually adapted to the realities, but they are there to help to realize the strategy, which would then help to attain the objectives. And of course, when the objectives are attained, then you can say that the organization is fulfilling its mission and it is working towards its vision. Looking at this from the perspective of an organization, there are certain questions that you might want to ask that would help to know if your VMOST is right. So questions like, do the members of staff of the organization know what the VMOST is? Do they know the individual elements? Are they familiar with the vision? Are they familiar with the mission? And on. Do they know the objectives? Do they know the strategy? Do they know the tactics? They might not know everything, but particularly the vision, the mission, the objectives. Those are things that the members of staff should know, because everybody needs to work in one direction. If the team is confused, if they don't have a direction, if they don't know what they're trying to accomplish, then they're not going to get there. So one of the ways to ensure that your organization is productive is to make sure that the VMOST is properly communicated and that it is known by all. The second thing is to ensure that there is alignment in the VMOST. So if you have a vision that goes in a particular direction, but then you have a mission that is something else entirely, that is a problem. The vision and the mission should be harmonized. In fact, the entire VMOST must show harmony. The vision, the mission, the objectives must explain, must break down the vision and the mission. The strategy or strategies must be things that work in the direction of fulfilling those objectives. And the tactics must also key into the strategy. So if you have a disconnect, then there is a problem. There must be harmony in the VMOST. Another question to ask is if the objectives are SMART. The objectives must be SMART, that is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So they must be specific. They must be about specific things. They must be measurable. There must be a way of knowing when they have been accomplished. There must be metrics with which they can be measured. They must be achievable. If you have objectives that are so lofty that they can never be accomplished, then in reality you are not working towards anything. So they must be achievable. They must be relevant, because if they're not relevant, then you're probably solving problems for the wrong organization or for the wrong market. So they must be relevant, and they must be time-bound. They must be time-bound. There must be a time factor. They are not things that you just leave till infinity and say these objectives can be accomplished anytime. No, there must be a time factor. There must be a time frame that guides the attainment of those objectives. If you complete the VMOST very well, you will realize that it would help you to resolve a lot of issues that have to do with internal dynamics in an organization. Why? Because once people are working in the same direction and everyone knows what the organization is trying to accomplish, it helps to give organizational harmony, and that can be very essential for the organization's strategy. Then also from the VMOST, you can have an idea of the organization's strengths and weaknesses. So if you're talking about a SWOT analysis, you talk about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The strengths and weaknesses come from the internal environment. And so you can get to know the strengths and weaknesses by examining the VMOST. Now we're going to look at the external environment. We're going to do some external environment analysis, and we're going to make use of the framework that is known as PESTLE. PESTLE, that is P-E-S-T-L-E. So why do you look at the external environment? Because the external environment can affect an organization, and the organization doesn't have to have any contribution towards it for it to be affected, which also implies that these factors are not within the control of the organization. Although, like I said earlier, the organization can decide on how it wants to respond to the factors. So let's look very quickly at PESTLE. The P in PESTLE stands for political. Political. These are the political factors that have a bearing on the organization. Let me give you an example. Right now, there is an ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. And whether we like it or not, regardless of whether we support that war or not, regardless of whether we like the players or the actors in it or not, regardless of what side that you are on, the war has affected several businesses and several organizations, some of which are not even in the same countries. Some of them are in other parts of the world. Now, if the war is affecting me, let's assume I'm a farmer, and the war is affecting my supply of grain, there really might be nothing I would be able to do to change the outcome of the war, or to stop them from fighting from far away Nigeria. However, I might be able to then choose what factors, what things I need to put in place to mitigate the effects on my business. So that's the political side to it. Political factors, change of government, change of regimes, government policies, things like that. Yet another example that I like giving is the example of the motorbike hailing business in Lagos, Nigeria. So this business model had become quite popular. There were some very well-known brands like Gokada, like Opay, and some other ones. They had become very popular. They had gotten a lot of funding. Millions of dollars had been poured in by foreign investors. And these businesses were beginning to thrive. And then one day, the Lagos state government decided that they were going to more or less ban these businesses. And by the time they introduced the ban on the use of motorbikes for commercial purposes on most of the major roads, the implication of that was that these businesses were affected. So all of a sudden, all the funding just went down the drain. It just more or less became like a waste. So those are political factors, and that might explain why investors are generally very careful about investing in unstable countries, politically unstable places, because political factors might just arise, some of which were not even factored in at the time of the strategic analysis, of the initial strategic analysis. They might just come up, and when they come up, then the company might be drastically affected. Of course, I should also say that those can be positive or negative, because a new government might come into power and that government encourages something that your own company is well positioned to maximize. So political factors can be positive or negative, and in a SWOT analysis, we would then say that they can be opportunities or they can be threats. Okay, so let's go on. The economic factors. The economic factors are things like interest rates, things like inflation, things like the monetary policies of the government of that place. So the economic factors obviously can also affect the organization. Take Nigeria, for example. Our currency, the naira, keeps falling. As at, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, the naira was something around 300 to a dollar, at least on the black market. Today, the naira is about 620 to a dollar on the black market. That is not only alarming, it has a lot of implications for businesses. Things are much more expensive. It is much more difficult to import things or to afford to buy things from outside the country because the currency is very weak. So those are factors that must be considered when planning or when strategizing for any business venture. The S stands for socio-cultural. Socio-cultural. The socio-cultural factors are the trends within society and culture. Trends like, for example, religious beliefs. Trends like birth rates. So maybe more people are getting born, or the population has suddenly switched to a system where they are giving birth to fewer children. Those are sociocultural trends that must be considered for business or for organizational strategy. In fact, trends in levels of education, trends in the types of beliefs that the people of that place have, and how those beliefs change. Those are very important considerations as well. Those are socio-cultural considerations. The T stands for technology. Technology. So the introduction of new technologies can change the game. For example, maybe self-driving cars, for instance. There is an entire industry that is built around cars that are driven by human beings. But if you have a situation where cars become self-driving, then it affects that industry. But it affects not only the industry of people-driven cars, it also affects several other industries. For example, driving schools. Suddenly, they are not going to be as relevant as they were before. Even video game manufacturers might be affected, because if they were making video games that had to do with car racing and stuff like that, perhaps they were making those games with drivers seated on the cars and that context. But with self-driving cars, all of those would change. The thinking behind it would change. So several industries can be affected. Another very good example that I like to give is the introduction of technology for advertising using social media. So, for example, now it makes more sense to advertise a lot of products on social media as against going on radio or going on television. What that implies is that there has been a shift. The industries, the companies that used to be the major ones before in the information space are no longer as important as they were before. And so Technology is very important. It must be considered as part of your factors when you're doing your organizational strategy. The L in PESTLE stands for legal, the legal factors. So in different countries, there are different legal factors. And what are the legal factors I'm talking about? Things like employment law, things like contract law, the different things that guide the legal frameworks in those countries. And I think that an important legal factor is also maybe the time it takes to get justice. That's very important. I once met a man in the US and we were talking, and then he told me that his organization would have loved to invest in Nigeria, but that they wouldn't be able to. And I was trying to push for him to abandon that mindset, but then he asked an important question. He said, if something goes wrong and we want to sue, we want to go to court, in Nigeria, it's going to take forever to get justice. And that for me was a very important point, because that shows that the legal factors are simply wanting. If justice is very difficult to get, if the laws are not very well defined or things like that, those are factors that must be considered in the organization's strategy. The final set of factors are the environmental factors. The environmental factors. And these are the trends in the environment, the things that affect the environment, or the trends that are upcoming with regards to the environment. It is important that while doing the organizational strategy, an organization must consider factors such as climate change and the effect of such trends, I mean the trends of the advocacy about climate change, on their own organization. Other environmental factors include things like deforestation, things like animal welfare, and other factors like that. So in this class, we've looked at organizational strategy, we defined strategy, and then we talked about the internal environment and we talked about the external environment. We said that the internal environment can be analyzed using a framework such as VMOST, and the external environment can be analyzed using PESTLE. If you're able to do those two very well, you should have a very good understanding of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of your organization. I look forward to seeing you in my next class, but don't forget to subscribe. Click on the subscribe button and leave a like, leave a comment. Let me know what you'd like me to cover subsequently. Don't also forget that you can actually learn business analysis with us at TWIM Institute. We have a website known as globalquals.com where you can go to and you can enroll for online classes where you not just get trained, but you can also get certified. You can get certified by BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT, because we're an accredited BCS training provider. So head over to globalquals.com. Till I see you in the next class, do have a lovely day. Bye.